best gift you could ever give me is to disappear from my life." My own son said that, holding in his hand the watch that had survived 3 generations. A Patek Philippe, ticking with the breath of my father. He smirked, turned it over like it was a trinket from a flea market, and added, "Seriously, Dad, who needs this junk? You'd do us all a favor if you handed over the house and finally checked yourself into a nursing home. That would be a real Christmas gift." Laughter rippled through the table like a cold draft. His wife snorted into her wine glass. Her father chuckled with approval. Even the kids glued to their phones smirked at the edges. They'd all heard it, and none of them disagreed. I sat there, my hands still stretched out, the box half open. Inside was the heartbeat of my family, and in my son's eyes it was nothing but garbage. "Maybe we should hang it on the tree, Melissa," he said, tossing the watch in his palm. "Would make a perfect ornament for old men, so they don't forget how little time they've got left." More laughter, cold, sticky. The kind that makes you want to stand up and throw every last one of them out of your house. Instead, I stayed seated, because sometimes silence cuts deeper than shouting. Then it was their turn to hand me a gift, a little box wrapped in cheap paper. Inside, a mug that read, "Best Grandpa," and a pair of gray Walmart socks. "Here," Michael said, tossing it across the table. "So your feet don't freeze while you're wasting away in that empty house of yours." The laughter came again, sharper this time. And in that moment I knew, to them, I wasn't a father, not even a man. Just a shadow, a burden, a piece of furniture they were too lazy to drag to the curb. I put my hand over the watch box, closed it, and squeezed until my knuckles went white. Let them think they'd humiliated me. Let them laugh. Tonight, they threw the first stone. But tomorrow, I'll throw it back hard enough to break every mask on their faces. Yowas, and as they laughed, I stared straight past them, into the silence beyond, thinking of you, the one listening to my story. If you know what it's like when your own family turns you into a joke, hit subscribe and drop a comment with your name and city. Let them believe we're alone, but we're not. And one day, they'll feel it. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, steady as a heartbeat, while the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. I'd grated orange peel into the filter the way Laura always used to. The citrus lifted the bitterness just enough to make the air feel warm, even with December biting at the windows. The radiator banged once, then settled. Outside, snow scraped under the plow's blade, a sound that always made me feel both secure and alone at the same time. I sat at the table with the leather watch box in front of me, dark, worn at the edges, smooth as skin where my thumb traced it. I didn't open it, not yet. Just knowing it was there steadied me. The phone buzzed face down. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Morning, Dad." Michael's voice was sharp, hurried, like he was already late. "Cold in that house? Furnace working? Melissa says it must cost you a fortune just to keep the place from freezing." "It's a house, not a hockey rink," I said. The coffee was hot on my tongue, and I let the silence ride a beat longer than usual. He gave that short laugh he uses when he wants to sand the edge off an insult. "Just thinking out loud. You know, downsizing wouldn't be the worst idea. There's that place near Oak Brook, Harbor Oaks, brand new, great amenities. You'd make friends." "I have a neighbor with a terrier," I said. Through the window I watched Mrs. Gomez tug her little dog past my gate. She waved with 2 fingers. I lifted my mug in return. "Don't be stubborn, Dad. Practical beats sentimental." "Since when?" I asked. On his end, a car door slammed. I heard him adjust his tone, softer now, careful. "Hey, random question. You still have that old watch? The one Grandpa gave you?" My eyes went to the box. "I do." "You ever think about selling it? I mean, you never wear it. Could be useful." "It already is," I said. Silence, long enough to feel the space widen between us. "All right," he said at last, voice bright again. "Christmas dinner. Melissa's doing sides. Can you keep it simple with the turkey? Her dad's got a sensitive palate. Maybe go light on the rosemary this time." I stared at the steam curling from my mug. "Tell him not to worry. I can count to 2. He laughed, forced. "That's the spirit. Love you, Dad." The line clicked dead before I could answer. I sat there a while, the house too quiet, the hum of the fridge louder than it should have been. I opened the watch box, just a crack, and the gold winked in the low light. The second hand ticked, steady, patient, like it knew something I didn't. For a moment I saw Michael at 8 years old, swinging his legs under the kitchen chair, asking why the big hand moved slower if it was bigger, Laura had leaned against the counter, flower on her cheek, and said, "Because big things don't rush, honey." I closed the box. On the counter sat today's mail, a glossy flyer for top dollar fast, real estate offers, the kind of junk that usually went straight to the bin. But one envelope was circled in red marker. Harbor Oaks Senior Living. Tour confirmed, it read. Wednesday, 2 p.m. My name on the line. I hadn't signed up for a tour, but somebody had. The smell of disinfectant and overripe fruit hit me as soon as I pushed through the sliding doors of Walmart. A kid screamed somewhere near the toy aisle, and the wheels of my cart rattled over the cracked tile. I always hated shopping close to Christmas. Too many people, too much noise. But my fridge hummed empty, and habit kept me moving through the aisles. I picked up milk, bread, a pack of ground beef. The store's speakers played a tinny version of Jingle Bell Rock. I used to hum along when Laura was with me. Now, it just scraped at my ears. My phone buzzed. Michael again. "Hey, Dad, quick question. Did you get your gas bill yet?" I shifted the phone to my shoulder and dropped a carton of eggs into the cart. "It came yesterday." "Why?" "Just curious." Melissa was saying, "Well, she worries. That house is big for one man. Utilities must be killing you." "I've managed 30 winters in it," I said. "Yeah, but back then you had Mom. Now it's just..." He stopped himself, cleared his throat. "I'm just saying, you don't have to carry all that. You could free up money, simplify, sell the place, move into something easier. You'd actually enjoy yourself." "I enjoy myself fine," I said, maybe too sharp. The woman beside me glanced up from her coupons. Michael sighed. "Don't get defensive. I'm trying to help. You keep saying you're fine, but what if something happens? Pipes burst, roof leaks. Then it's on us anyway. Wouldn't it make sense to plan ahead? Plan ahead for me to disappear?" I asked. He gave that laugh again, the one that covered a slap with a smile. "You're twisting my words, forget it. We'll talk at Christmas dinner, just think about it." The line crackled. He hung up before I could reply. I stood in the middle of the cereal aisle, staring at rows of boxes screaming for attention. Frosted Flakes, Cheerios, Lucky Charms, bright colors for people with simpler lives. At the checkout, the cashier scanned my items, each beep sharp in the air. She looked up, recognition in her eyes. "Aren't you Michael's dad? He was here last week, talked about how much responsibility it is, looking after family." She smiled like it was a compliment. "Sounds like he's doing a lot for you." I didn't answer. I slid my card through the reader, listening to the receipt print with its dry mechanical hiss. Outside, the parking lot smelled of exhaust and wet pavement. I loaded the groceries into the trunk and paused. Across the way, a man scraped ice from his windshield, muttering under his breath. The cold bit into my hands even through the gloves. I sat in the driver's seat, let the engine warm, and stared at the receipt still crumpled in my hand. $37.82, paid by me, for me. Yet somehow my son's name was attached to every detail of my life, like a watermark I never asked for. The heater roared, and my windshield began to clear. But no matter how hard the defroster blew, I couldn't shake the fog pressing down in my chest. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fryer oil, the kind that clings to your coat long after you leave. A bell over the door gave a tired jingle as I stepped in from the wind. The windows were fogged with breath and steam. Someone had drawn a heart in the condensation and then smeared it away. Bears highlights rolled on the muted TV over the counter, captions stumbling across the screen. "Dad, over here!" Michael waved from a corner booth. Melissa sat beside him, and across from them her parents Gerald and Patricia, already halfway through a basket of onion rings. The vinyl seat squeaked when I slid in. The table was sticky at the edges where a cloth had missed. "Thought we'd make it a family brunch," Michael said, bright and casual. "You don't mind, do you?" "I wasn't asked," I said. "Don't be dramatic," Melissa murmured, eyes on her phone. A waitress with a pencil behind her ear whisked by. "Be right with you, folks," she sang, leaving a comet tail of coffee and bleach. Gerald lifted his glass. "To keeping things simple," he said, as if to the room. "Life's short." Michael gave me a sideways smile. "Speaking of simple, Dad, you should order from the senior menu, smaller portions. Easier on the, you know." He twirled a finger vaguely toward his midsection. "I'll eat what I want," I said. Patricia leaned in. "Michael told us you've been having a hard time with that big house. So much upkeep for one person. We adore that place, of course. It just seems impractical." "Impractical," I repeated. The word tasted like old pennies. The waitress reappeared, flipped her pad. "What can I get you?" "Western omelet," I said. "Toast?" "Rye." "I senior comes with fruit cup," Michael said to her, as if I weren't there. "He'll do that." I set the menu down. "He won't." A couple in the next booth looked over. The woman had a church program folded on her lap. She pretended to study the specials board. "Don't make this weird," Melissa whispered. "We're trying to help." The waitress took the rest of the orders and moved off. Forks chimed on plates around us. The espresso machine hissed like a cat. A toddler banged a spoon, his father counting under his breath the way fathers do when they're deciding whether to laugh or snap. Gerald dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "Michael says you've got valuables lying around. You should catalog them. Prevent any confusion later." His eyes flicked to my wrist. I checked the time out of reflex, and the gold edge of the Patek caught the neon. For a moment, the light made a small sun on my skin. "Careful," Michael said loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Wouldn't want that antique to fall apart." He chuckled. "Dad keeps old things, sentimental, even when they don't work anymore." "It works," I said. "Sure," Patricia smiled. "But you know what really holds value? Real estate." She sipped her mimosa, eyes kind behind frames that weren't. "Homes should be lived in, not preserved like museums." "Home is where the person paying the mortgage says it is," I said. Michael shifted forward, elbows on the table, voice soft but sharp at the edges. "No one's attacking you. We just think planning ahead would spare everyone a lot of trouble. Imagine, no stairs, no shoveling, people your age around. We could host holidays. You could—" "Disappear?" I asked. He blinked, then smiled wider. "Integrate." The plates arrived, heat lifting off the eggs in waves, toast soldiered upright in a wire rack. The coffee smelled burned. The cream came in tiny plastic tubs, their foil lids sweating. I salted my omelet and ate in silence, chewing until the noise of the room settled into a low, indifferent hum. When the check landed, Michael snatched it. "Dad insisted on treating," he told the waitress with a gleam, loud enough to make the church couple look our way again. "I didn't," I said. "Oh, come on," he laughed. "You know how independent he is." He slid the leather folder toward me with 2 fingers, a little shove that felt like a dare. "You brought your wallet, right?" The waitress stood there, weight on one hip, pen tucked back behind her ear. I could feel the heat in my face, the way a flush betrays a man faster than anger. I pulled my card and set it down. "On the senior special?" she asked without thinking. Michael barked a laugh. "Perfect." "It's not," I said. By the time the pen was back in my hand, Gerald was talking again, louder now, performing for the room. "Well, when it's all settled, we'll throw a proper housewarming for you two. Transitions are smoother when everyone agrees." "Everyone doesn't," I said. The churchwoman shifted, torn between politeness and curiosity. Her husband gave me a small nod, sympathy camouflaged as a cough. Michael leaned close, voice low. "Don't be stubborn, Dad. Paperwork is easier when you can still sign." I looked at him for a long second, long enough to see 8-year-old Michael swing his legs under this same posture, asking for hot chocolate. The boy was gone. The angle of the jaw remained. The waitress returned the receipt. I scrawled my name. The cheap pen scratched like a thorn. As we stood to leave, Gerald clapped my shoulder. "We'll drop by later," he said. "Take a look at the attic, measure a few things, purely to help." "Don't," I said. Outside, the wind cut my face raw. The neon open sputtered behind the glass, trying to hold its last bar of light. Michael lingered by my car door. "Wednesday at 2, he said, easy as a weather report. "Harbor Oaks, don't be late." He smiled and walked away before I could answer. The bell over the diner door jingled again, and for a second the warm smell of coffee chased me into the cold before it vanished altogether. The house smelled of dust and furniture polish when I stepped inside. I hadn't bothered with the lights yet. The glow from the street lamps bled through the blinds and pale bars. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like a steady metronome, each second carving out the silence. I set my coat on the hook, the fabric still cold, and carrying the faint odor of fryer oil from the diner. I had just poured myself a glass of water when the doorbell rang. Too late for neighbors. I checked the peephole. Michael and Melissa stood on the porch, both smiling too brightly, coats pulled tight against the wind. "Surprise," Melissa sang when I opened the door. "We were in the neighborhood." "Which neighborhood?" I asked, but stepped aside. They brought with them a rush of cold air and the perfume of some expensive brand Melissa wore too much of. She drifted toward the living room, as though the house already belonged to her. Michael lingered by the entry, rubbing his hands together. "Nice night," he said. "It's 20 degrees." He chuckled, followed me into the kitchen. Melissa had already opened the watch box on the counter. She tilted the Patek under the overhead light, lips pursed. "Funny little thing," she said. "Fragile. Wouldn't last in our house with the kids running around." "Close it," I said. She snapped the lid, but not before giving Michael a look. One of those shared glances couples use like knives. They sat at the table. Melissa crossed her legs, glossy boots clicking against the chair rung. Michael leaned forward, elbows on the wood, palms steepled. "Dad," he began, careful. "We've been talking. About, the future." "I'm still in it," I said. "Of course," he said quickly. "But transitions are easier when they're planned. Paperwork, signatures, it avoids confusion later. You wouldn't want family fighting after you're gone." Melissa smiled, head tilted. "Exactly. You'd be protecting us, making things smooth." The radiator banged. The sound felt like a warning shot in the quiet. "I'm not gone," I said. "No one's saying you are," Michael said, voice soft but heavy with impatience. "But it's smart to prepare. For example, the house. If we had it in our name already, we could—" "Stop." He blinked, then laughed like I'd told a joke. "Dad, come on, it's just paperwork. Everyone does it." Melissa leaned closer. "Your handwriting's still steady. That matters. Later, it might not be." The words landed like stones. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the floor. "I'll handle my own house, my own things." Michael spread his hands, palms up. "We're just trying to help. You don't want the state involved, do you? Probate court eats everything." "You sound rehearsed," I said. His jaw tightened, but he kept the smile. "Think about it, that's all." They stood. Melissa smoothed her coat sleeve, eyes drifting toward the stairs as though cataloging. At the door, Michael pressed a folded envelope into my hand. "Some brochures. Read them." When they'd gone, I shut the door hard enough to rattle the glass. The house fell quiet again, the clock resuming its slow tick. I carried the envelope to the kitchen, laid it beside the watch box. Inside were glossy pamphlets: Harbor Oaks Senior Living, Top Dollar Realty, Probate Made Simple. One page had notes in neat handwriting, Melissa's again, circles around the words power of attorney and transfer on death. I read the lines twice. My throat was dry, the water glass empty beside me. The clock ticked louder, or maybe I was hearing it differently now. The living room buzzed with voices when I stepped inside. Melissa's family had filled every chair, coats draped over the sofa, wine glasses clinked on the coffee table. I stood by the doorway holding the pie I'd baked, the smell of cinnamon still warm. No one moved to make space. "Just set it there," Melissa said, pointing at the counter already crowded with store-bought desserts. She didn't look up from her phone. I waited a moment, then slid the pie onto the edge. The box tipped, almost falling. Michael caught it, set it aside. "Dad, you didn't have to. We've got plenty." A laugh rolled across the room. Someone had told a joke I wasn't part of. I tried to sit, but every seat was taken. Gerald sprawled in the recliner, boots on the ottoman, talking loud about property taxes. So I stayed standing, plate in my hands, fork tapping soft against china. The TV blared football highlights. The smell of wine and garlic filled the air. I felt like a shadow in my own son's house. Michael raised his glass. "To family," he said. Everyone cheered. He didn't look at me once. I set my plate down untouched and stepped onto the porch. Cold air stung my face, sharper than anything inside. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, Melissa's decorations over every corner like a catalog spread. Guests filled the dining room, neighbors and friends I barely knew. My son stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, smile practiced. "Before dessert," he said, "there's something we should clear up." The chatter hushed. I sat halfway down the table, napkin crumpled in my lap. Michael's voice carried smooth, like he'd rehearsed. "Dad's been struggling with the old place. Melissa and I have decided to take responsibility. We're moving forward with transferring the deed. It just makes sense." Gasps, then polite murmurs. Someone clapped, mistaking it for good news. I pushed back my chair. "You decided?" My throat felt dry. He smiled, wide enough for the whole table. "Don't worry, Dad. You'll still have your room at Harbor Oaks. We already scheduled the paperwork." Laughter broke from a corner, nervous and cruel. Melissa's father raised his glass. "Smart move. The young ones should handle things." My hands shook around the napkin. That house is mine. Michael leaned forward, voice still light but sharp enough to cut. No, Dad, it's ours, and it's time you accepted it. Silence stretched, heavy and brittle. Forks paused in midair. Eyes darted between us, like watching a tennis match. The smell of turkey and cloves suddenly made me nauseous. Melissa laid her hand over Michael's. Everyone here agrees it's better this way. A neighbor nodded too quickly. Another whispered behind a palm. I rose slowly, the chair scraping across hardwood. My heart pounded loud enough I thought they'd hear it. Michael shrugged, pretending calm. Dad, don't make this dramatic. You'll thank us later. No more bills, no more responsibilities. Just peace. Someone chuckled. Early retirement. The laughter stung sharper than wine. My face burned. I looked down the table. Every glance slid away. Not one hand reached for me. Even the children looked at me like I was furniture being moved. I set the napkin on the plate, careful, deliberate. Enjoy your housewarming, I said, though my voice cracked. And I walked out. Past the wreath on the door, past the glow of string lights, into the night so cold it burned my lungs. Behind me, laughter swelled again, muffled by walls that no longer felt like mine. The house was dark when I stepped inside, colder than it should have been. I didn't bother with the lights. The hallway smelled of old wood and faint polish, the kind Laura used to insist on every Saturday. I set my coat on the hook and listened. Nothing but the grandfather clock, its steady tick loud in the silence. I made coffee I didn't want. The mug warmed my hands, but the liquid cooled too fast, skin forming on the surface. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam fade into the air. The watch box lay beside me. I opened it, closed it, opened it again. The gold face stared back, indifferent. I picked up the phone. Michael's number was still near the top. I pressed it, held it to my ear, straight to voicemail, his voice cheerful. Leave a message. I didn't. Instead, I dialed Henry, my oldest friend. We hadn't spoken in months, but he used to say, call any time. The line rang 4 times, then his voice low and distracted. Tom? Sorry, can't talk. Big week. We'll catch up. The click was quick, final. I tried again, my neighbor John. He answered, breathless. Hey Tom, look, can we do this later? Melissa asked me to help Michael with some furniture tonight. Big move, you understand. The line went dead before I could say I didn't. The house creaked, the fridge groaned, compressor kicking on. I poured the cold coffee into the sink. The drain swallowed it without a sound. I walked through the living room, past the photos on the wall. Laura smiling in the garden. Michael at 6 with missing teeth. I touched the glass, left a print, wiped it away. On the couch, I sat until the furnace shut down, and the silence deepened again. The clock ticked. The second hand moved steady, merciless. I whispered into the empty room, "Where did everybody go?" No answer, just the faint rattle of the window as the wind pressed against it. The next morning, frost webbed across the window. My breath fogged the glass as I looked out at the street. A couple walked their dog, heads bent together, not seeing me. I tried Michael again, straight to voicemail. I left a message this time. We need to talk. Don't do this. Call me. My voice cracked. I hung up before it got worse. An hour later, no callback. I dialed again. Same. By noon, I'd left 5 messages, all unanswered. I called Melissa's phone. She picked up. Laughter in the background, the clink of glasses. Oh, Tom, we're busy right now. We'll get back to you. The line went dead. I sat at the table with a sandwich that tasted of cardboard. The bread stuck, the mustard burned. Halfway through chewing, I spat it into a napkin. At dusk, I stepped outside. John was in his driveway, carrying a box with Michael's handwriting on it. I raised a hand. Evening, he froze, then ducked his head, pretended not to hear, slid the box into his trunk, and drove away without looking up. The cold bit through my sweater. I stood until my fingers stung. Inside, the clock still ticked. I tried Henry again, straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. By midnight, the house felt smaller, walls closing in. I sat with the watch in my hand, listening to the faint tick. A thought pressed in. If time is loyal to no one, then why was I loyal to them? I pressed the watch to my ear, heard the rhythm steady, relentless. My throat tightened. The phone lit up. One new text from Michael. 3 words. Don't call again. I set the phone face down. The tick of the clock grew louder, filling the room until it was all I could hear. I didn't sleep. The house clicked inside until a thin seam of gray showed at the blinds. Coffee went on out of habit. I didn't taste it. I spread the brochures on the table. Harbor Oaks, probate made simple. A realtor grin with too many teeth. Melissa's round A's circled power of attorney. Make him small on paper. I slid the watch box aside and opened the junk drawer. Pens, rubber bands, keys to locks I didn't own anymore. Beneath them, a crumpled grocery bag with a weight to it. A manila folder. Inside, a draft durable power of attorney. My name misspelled on page 1. Michael's full name perfect on every line. A sticky note folded over the signature block. Have him initial here. M. The boiler thumped in the basement like a warning. Headlights slid across the ceiling. Tires on snow. Michael's SUV nosed to the curb. The bell rang once, then again, impatient. I shoved the folder under the sink behind the trash bags and wiped my hands on a dish towel, heart doing double beats. Dad, Bright rehearsed. Thought I'd take you to Harbor Oaks. Quick peek. You'll love the library. I'm not dressed. The kettle whistled. I turned the flame low to make it sound like I was busy. Keys rattled. He'd brought his. The deadbolt held. Metal clicked on metal, small and angry. Where's the top key? In my pocket, I said, and let the silence lean. He laughed once. 10 minutes. I'll wait in the car. Footsteps retreated. The engine idled. Exhaust ghosted through the porch light. I knelt at the sink and slid the folder into the false bottom Laura had insisted on, back when we hid birthday gifts from Michael. My hands remembered the trick. Lift, slide, settle. The wood kissed back into place. I exhaled for the first time in a minute. Phone, camera. I shot photos of each page, dates, initials, the notary line still blank. I mailed them to myself and printed them on the old inkjet that coughed like a smoker. Each sheet bled blue at the edges, but came out legible. I tucked the copies under the radiator to curl dry. A tap at the window. Michael's face, an oval in fog. Clock's ticking, he mouthed, tapping his wrist. The irony put a taste of pennies in my mouth. On the porch, snow squeaked under my boots. The air smelled of cold metal and someone's dryer sheets down the block. I slid into the passenger seat. Heat blasted my knees. Michael grinned without warmth. You'll keep an open mind, he said. Right. I'll use it, I said. He pulled from the curb. The watch under my sleeve ticked once, then again, steady as a metronome. Beneath the sink, the folder lay quiet in the dark, and for the first time since Christmas, I felt gravity shift my way. Small as a paper edge, sharp enough to draw blood if someone grabbed too fast. We rolled past salt-crusted mailboxes. Wipers scraped a rind of ice. An ad for reverse mortgages crackled, then gave way to carols. Michael drummed 2 fingers on the wheel. I counted the taps. Time to measure, time to use. The lobby of Rains and Keller smelled like copier toner and wet wool. Fluorescence hummed over framed degrees. I wiped road salt from my shoes and slid the manila copies into my coat. The receptionist looked up without smiling. Do you have an appointment? Walk in, I said. Probate. I let my voice carry just enough to sound like money might be hiding in the room. She hesitated, then picked up a phone. Mr. Rains, 10 minutes. I sat. A TV in the corner looped courthouse footage. A man coughed. The heat was set too high. My skin prickled under my coat. Mr. Hendricks? The voice was dry, precise. Rains himself, thin, gray, a slate tie. His office smelled of lemon oil and paper dust. He gestured to a leather chair that creaked when I sat. What can I do for you? I slid the copies across. My son brought me this to sign. He read, tapping the margin with a capped pen. Durable power of attorney granting broad authority. Badly drafted, but dangerous if notarized. You haven't signed. I haven't. Good. We'll build a wall. He opened a drawer, produced 2 forms. First, revocation of any prior powers. Second, a transfer on death instrument putting your house into a living trust. You as trustee. Successor trustee. Someone you trust. My granddaughter, I said, saying it steadied my hands. He nodded. We'll also add a no contest clause to your will. If your son challenges, he forfeits. It won't stop a suit, but it chills. He glanced up. Do you have the original draft? Hidden, I said. I brought copies. Enough for now. We'll get a notary, 2 witnesses. He pressed the intercom. Janice? Footsteps. The receptionist appeared, cool as January. Yes, sir. Block an hour, notary in 15. She left, Perfume lingered. Rains leaned back. Don't discuss any of this in your home. Unplug any smart devices. Meet deliveries on the porch. Assume nothing is private. Paranoid? I asked. Experienced. He slid a pad to me. Write the names of anyone who's been in your house this week. I wrote. My son's name looked stranger in ink than it did in my head. A shadow crossed the glass. A pause. Knuckles tapped twice. Janice opened the door. A Michael Hendricks is here to see his father, she said carefully. Rains didn't blink. You're not here. He stood. Janice, tell him Mr. Hendricks is in conference and cannot be disturbed. He turned back to me. Front exit, service corridor, go now. Adrenaline tasted like metal. I gathered the pad, the copies, the new forms. The corridor smelled of dust and carpet. At the side door, winter hit my face like a slap. Mr. Hendricks, Rains called softly. I turned. He handed me a flat black folder. Your revocation, unsigned, come back at 4, different door. I tucked it under my coat and stepped into the pale sun. My phone buzzed. Michael. Where are you? I let it ring until it stopped, then walked toward the L, the folder warm at my ribs, the first real shape of a plan beating in time with my pulse. Now, go. The house felt different after the meeting with Rains. Same walls, same clock ticking in the hall, but now every sound carried weight. The fridge's low hum was too loud. Even the floorboards complained under my steps, as if the house itself knew I was hiding something. I set the black folder from Rains under the cushion of Laura's old armchair. My hands shook a little, not from fear, but from the knowledge that one wrong move and Michael would have everything he wanted. That night I waited until the streets settled quiet, no cars, no voices, before pulling the draft power of attorney from its hiding spot under the sink. I spread it on the kitchen table, snapped photos page by page, then I slid my phone into a glass on speaker mode, hit record, and dialed Michael. He answered fast. Finally, you ready to sign tomorrow? Not yet, I said. I let my voice sound tired, cracked. I want you to explain again. What exactly am I signing? He laughed. Dad, come on. It's just giving me authority to handle the boring stuff. Bills, accounts. You won't even notice. But it says you'd own the house. A pause. Then softer, sharp at the edges. It says what it needs to. Do you want to end up broke in probate court? Because that's what happens when old men get stubborn. I kept him talking about taxes, accounts, what he'd do once the place was in our name. Every word funneled straight into the recorder. My hands sweated against the glass, but I didn't stop. Headlights swept the window. My chest tightened. Michael's SUV turned into my drive, crunching snow. Are you home? He asked. I killed the call, snatched the phone from the glass, shoved the papers back under the sink. My fingers fumbled with the false bottom. The wood stuck, then gave. I wiped sweat on my jeans and barely straightened before the knock rattled the door. Dad, you up? I opened halfway, leaning against the frame to block his view. What are you doing here at midnight? He grinned too wide. Thought I'd check on you, see if you needed help with tomorrow's paperwork. Behind my back, the clock ticked steady. In my pocket, the recorder app still glowed red. I'm fine, I said. You sure? Can I come in? His eyes flicked past my shoulder, sharp and searching. I tightened my grip on the door. The house is cold. Go home. For a long second, we just looked at each other, his smile hardening, my knuckles white on the frame. Finally, he chuckled, slapped the door jamb. Suit yourself. Big day tomorrow. I waited until his taillights vanished down the street before pulling the phone from my pocket. 37 minutes of audio. Proof. I exhaled, slow, heavy, almost caught, almost, but still standing. The next day, the house was too bright. Sun bounced off the snow and pushed through the blinds like interrogation lamps. I brewed coffee just to have something in my hands, but the taste turned bitter before it cooled. At 9 sharp, Michael showed up. He didn't knock this time, just let himself in with the spare key I'd forgotten to collect. His boots squeaked on the tile. Dad, he said, voice all honey. Did you look over the papers? I kept my back to him, rinsing the mug. I skimmed. He set a leather folder on the counter. Good. We can go to the notary this afternoon. Quick, painless. You'll feel better once it's done. I wiped the counter too slowly, buying seconds. What happens if I don't sign? Silence. I turned. His smile had slipped. You don't want to make this difficult, he said quietly. Melissa's father put a lot into arranging this. It'll look bad if you resist. I shrugged. Bad for who? He laughed, but it rang thin. You know what I mean. The air felt heavy. He stepped closer, eyes scanning the room. Funny thing, I called last night, but your line was busy. Long call, huh? My pulse jumped. The phone lay face down on the table, red glow of the recorder icon still faint in the corner. I slid my hand over it. Telemarketers, I said. Wouldn't hang up. He studied me too long. Then, with that same too-wide smile, he plucked the phone from under my hand, flipped it over. Battery's low, he said, setting it back down, but his eyes had narrowed. He left after another round of coaxing, folder untouched. His SUV idled at the curb longer than it needed to before finally pulling away. When the sound faded, I checked the phone, recorder still running. My hand shook as I stopped it, saved the file. Almost caught again. I sat at the table, watched ticking steady under my sleeve, and whispered into the quiet, time's on my side, not his. The call came just past midnight. The house was dark except for the glow of the streetlight leaking through the blinds. I picked up on the third ring, more out of habit than choice. Dad, Michael's voice was too calm, stretched thin like wire. Funny thing, I checked your phone records. You had a call last night that lasted almost 40 minutes. Who were you talking to? My throat tightened. Telemarketers don't quit easy. Silence. Then a soft laugh, not warm at all. You're a terrible liar. The clock in the hallway ticked, loud as hammers. I pictured the recorder file saved on my phone. The folder Rains had given me tucked under Laura's chair cushion. One slip, and everything would unravel. I don't need to explain my calls, I said. You do if they're about me, he snapped before catching himself. His tone flipped smooth again. I just don't want you confused by predatory lawyers. They circle old men like vultures. I let the pause hang long enough for him to hear the air move. I'll decide who circles me. For a moment I thought he'd hang up. Instead, his voice dropped. If you cross me, Dad, you'll regret it. Not just you, everyone connected to you. The line clicked dead. I set the phone down carefully, as though it might explode. My reflection stared back from the black screen, pale, hollow, older than I wanted to admit. The next morning, the threat still clung like smoke. I walked to Walgreens for aspirin. The cashier, the same girl as before, looked nervous when she saw me. Your son was in earlier, she said, scanning the box. Asked if anyone had seen you with papers. Said you'd been confused lately. He seemed worried. Worried, I repeated. Yeah. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. He asked if you'd bought a recorder. I signed the receipt with a shaking hand. Outside, the air felt sharper than a knife. Back home, I checked the hiding spot. The recorder was still there, the folder still tucked under the chair. But the house no longer felt safe. Every window like an open eye, every creak of the floor like a footstep. I pressed the watch to my ear, listened to the steady tick. Time's still mine, I told myself. But Michael was close, too close. Saturday morning, Michael showed up without warning. His SUV idled at the curb, exhaust spilling like smoke signals. He came in carrying a folder, casual smile painted on, too thick. Dad, thought I'd save you some hassle, he said, sliding papers across the table. Melissa's father drafted a cleaner version. All you have to do is initial. No lawyers, no waiting in line. Easy. The folder sat heavy in front of me. My pulse tapped at my temples. I'll look at it later, I said. Oh, why later? We've got a notary waiting down the block. Just a quick drive. I'm not dressed. He laughed. You don't need to be. You'll be back in 20 minutes. I lifted the first page, eyes scanning lines that handed him everything. House, accounts, even medical decisions. The notary seal was blank, waiting. Michael leaned closer, voice lower. Dad, refusing will only make this harder. On you. On us. My hand tightened on the edge of the page. He watched me, waiting for the slip, the signature. From outside, a sharp knock rattled the glass. Mrs. Gomez stood on the porch, terrier in her arms, a leash trailing. She waved, mouthing something about the mailman. I pushed the papers back, rose. Excuse me. Michael's jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. Sure, we'll finish in a minute. On the porch, Mrs. Gomez leaned close. Your son asked me if you'd been misplacing things. He said you were forgetful. I told him you seemed fine. You are fine, right? I'm fine, I said. My voice cracked anyway. When I stepped back inside, Michael had the watch box in his hand. He flipped it open, studied the gold face. Still keeping this junk? He asked. Wouldn't cover a month at Harbor Oaks. Put it down. He turned it over once more, then dropped it back into the box. "Don't drag this out, Dad. Time's running short." His eyes lingered on me a beat too long. Then he smiled again, all teeth. "I'll come back tomorrow." The door closed behind him. I sagged against the frame, breath coming hard, almost signed, almost fooled. The clock ticked steady in the hall, but every sound felt like it might betray me. Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Michael's name lit the screen, but this time the message was short. "Family meeting. Tonight. Be here." No question mark, no choice. I drove over just as the sun bled out behind the rooftops. Melissa's family already filled their living room, coats on hooks, wine in glasses, voices humming like a hive. I stood in the doorway holding my cap, the outsider in a room that was supposed to be mine too. Michael clapped his hands. "All right, let's settle this." He held up a stack of papers. Same folder, same poison. "Dad's been stubborn, but it's time for clarity. Everyone should know what's best." Melissa chimed in, sweet as sugar. "He'll be more comfortable once this is signed, safer. We can manage things better than he can alone." Eyes turned toward me. Gerald smirked, already convinced. Patricia murmured something about avoiding probate nightmares. I felt my pulse climb, every gaze pressed like a weight. For a second, I thought about giving in, just to end the circus. Michael pushed the pen across the coffee table. "Sign it, right here, right now." The room went still, forks poised above plates. The smell of garlic and red wine thick in the air. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered, my chest hammered. If I wrote my name, everything was gone. Then I looked at the watch on my wrist. The second hand ticked, steady, patient. Laura's words echoed, "Big things don't rush." I set the pen down, slowly. "I'll let my lawyer look first." The silence cracked. Melissa's face pinched. Gerald barked, "Lawyer?" "What lawyer?" Michael's smile broke, sharp and angry. "You went behind my back?" I met his eyes. "I'm still allowed to choose who circles me." He leaned forward, voice low, dangerous. "If you drag some parasite into this, you'll regret it. Don't test me, Dad." The room shifted, whispers, raised brows. Someone coughed to break the tension. I stood, slid the folder back toward him. "We're done tonight." Gasps rippled. Patricia muttered, "Stubborn old fool." I walked out. My hands shook, but not from fear. The recorder in my coat pocket was still on, catching every threat, every word. Outside, the night air sliced clean and cold. My breath came sharp but steady, almost crushed, almost cornered, but not broken. The Channel 7 van was already double parked outside the Cook County Courthouse, antenna up like a spear in the gray morning. Reporters hunched in their coats, breath fogging the air. Someone shouted a name that wasn't mine. Inside, the metal detector beeped in nervous bursts, and the guard waved people through with 2 fingers, bored. Fluorescence hummed above marble that made every heel click sound like a verdict. Raines met me by the elevators, slate tie, legal pad under his arm. "No speeches," he said. "Truth, documents, sequence. Let them talk themselves into a hole." "Can they do it quietly?" I asked. "Never," he said, and almost smiled. Down the hall, Michael stood with Melissa and her parents, Gerald and Patricia, framed by a Christmas wreath somebody hadn't taken down. Gerald's voice carried, "Open and shut. Older gentlemen, poor judgment. Court loves guardianship." Patricia smoothed Melissa's sleeve like they were shopping, not about to carve up my life. Michael spotted me. The smile he put on didn't reach his eyes. He stepped close enough for me to smell his cologne. "Last chance, Dad. Withdraw whatever you filed, and we make this easy." I looked at his hand on the folder, at the knuckles gone white. "I've had easy. It looked a lot like you laughing." His jaw clicked. A reporter leaned in, mic hovering. "Mr. Hendricks, are you here to contest a guardianship petition?" Raines angled his body so the mic caught his shoulder instead of my face. "Not today," Raines said calmly. "Today's about clarity." The clerk called our case, Department 12. We moved as a knot through the double doors into a room that smelled faintly of toner and the burnt edge of old coffee. The judge, silver hair, glasses low, glanced over the docket, then at us. "Good morning. Appearances?" "David Raines for Mr. Thomas Hendricks," Raines said. Fletcher for the petitioners," said Melissa's father, proud of the word. The judge's eyes came to me, took in my age, my coat, my hands. "Mr. Hendricks, we're here on an emergency request to appoint your son as temporary guardian of your estate. Do you understand that?" "I do," I said. My voice surprised me by not shaking. Fletcher launched in. Your Honor, my clients are concerned. There's confusion, possible susceptibility. Documents have been mishandled. We're simply trying to protect Mr. Hendricks from predatory influences. Rains didn't move. Predators rarely carry notary seals, Your Honor, and confusion tends to draft with perfect spelling for everyone's name but the target's. A titter ran through the benches. The judge raised a hand. Quiet fell like a blanket. We'll proceed, Mr. Rains. Rains stood, slid a single paper to the clerk. Revocation of any existing powers. Living trust executed yesterday with proper witnesses. And, more relevant to today, a recording we'd like the court to hear. It speaks to intent and to method. Michael shifted. Melissa's fingers dug crescents into his sleeve. Manufactured, Fletcher said. Out of context? Context has a timestamp, Counselor, Rains said softly, and a location ping. The judge nodded to the clerk. Let's hear a minute or two. If it's irrelevant, we stop. Speakers crackled. In that sterile room, my kitchen came alive. The fridge hum, the small echo of tile, my own voice carefully tired. What exactly am I signing? Then Michael's laugh, smooth as oil. It says what it needs to. Do you want to end up broke in probate court? That's what happens when old men get stubborn. A ripple went through the benches. Someone coughed into their sleeve. The judge's eyes lifted to Michael, then back to the file. Fletcher half stood. Your Honor, that's... Sit for now, Mr. Fletcher, the judge said, not unkindly. I kept my eyes on the table. The wood nicked where 1,000 other hands had tapped while they waited to be seen. The second hand on the courtroom clock clicked with the patience of a hunter. Rains leaned toward me. This is the first stare, he whispered. Don't look down. I didn't. I listened to my son's voice fill the room he'd thought would be his stage, and I waited for the moment he'd stop performing and start sweating. The recording cut off, the last word, stubborn, still hanging in the air like smoke. For a beat, the whole courtroom was quiet, except for the shuffle of a reporter's pen scratching faster now. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing at Michael. Fletcher recovered first. Your Honor, anyone can splice audio. We object to its admission without expert verification. Rains was calm. Then, we'll let the written words speak. He slid another exhibit across the table, the same manila pages Melissa had left in my kitchen. Drafted with petitioner's handwriting in the margins, circled phrases, transfer on death. Have him initial here. You'll notice the signature block is blank, because my client never agreed. The clerk passed it up. The judge adjusted glasses, scanning, lips tightening at the sticky note. Have him initial here, M. A low murmur rose in the gallery. Reporters leaned forward, cameras clicking, the fluorescent lights buzzing like bees. Michael shot to his feet. That's not mine. Anyone could have written that. Then you'll welcome a handwriting analysis, Rains said, unless you prefer we subpoena the notary you lined up. I believe Mr. Gerald Carter had an appointment scheduled. Interesting coincidence since he sits in this courtroom today. All eyes turned to Gerald. His tan had drained to gray. He started to stand, then thought better, sinking back into the bench. Patricia clutched her purse strap like it was a lifeline. The judge tapped the gavel lightly. Control your side, Mr. Fletcher. Michael's face was red now, sweat at his hairline. He forced a laugh that rang flat. This is ridiculous. My father doesn't know what he's doing. He's confused, manipulated. He probably doesn't even understand what he's saying right now. That was my cue. My throat felt dry, but the words came steady. I understand every word. I understood when you told me to disappear, when you threw my gift in the trash, when you laughed at me in my own house. The gallery erupted, gasps, whispers, someone muttering, God Almighty. A camera flash lit Michael's face, catching the shine of sweat. The judge raised a hand again, but didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with attention. Mr. Hendricks, you're clear and coherent to me. Continue. I laid my hand on the folder Rains had given me. My son wanted me gone before I was dead. That's his clarity. These papers, that recording, that's his respect. I don't need to embellish. Michael's chair screeched back as he half rose again, anger naked now. You're twisting everything. Dad, tell them you didn't mean that recording. Tell them. But my silence weighed heavier than any denial. The judge turned toward Rains. Do you have more? We do, he said, almost gently. He glanced at me, then back at the bench. But sometimes the first cracks are enough, shall we? The judge nodded once. Proceed. Michael's fingers drummed against the table, fast. uneven. I watched them like I used to watch him drum silverware on the kitchen counter as a boy. Back then it was music, now it was panic. The clerk handed back the marked exhibits. The papers shook just slightly in his grip, enough for the front row to notice. A murmur ran through the benches again. Neighbors, parish friends, even one of Michael's colleagues who had slipped in for the spectacle. Raines didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the judge. Your Honor, if the court doubts intention, we can offer corroboration, direct from the petitioner's mouth. Michael barked a laugh. More fake recordings? Not fake, Raines said. He clicked a small remote, and the speaker system crackled again. My kitchen at midnight, my own voice steady but thin. What exactly am I signing? Then Michael's, sharp, impatient. It says what it needs to. Do you want to end up broke in probate court? That's what happens when old men get stubborn. Reporters leaned forward, pens scratching. Someone in the gallery whispered, "That's his voice." Clear as day. Michael slammed a fist against the table. "You can't use that! He didn't have permission to record me!" The judge looked over her glasses. "Permission is not required in this jurisdiction, Mr. Hendricks. Sit down." The order in her voice snapped the air. Michael obeyed, lips pressed white. Melissa clutched his arm, whispering fast, but her words carried in the hush. "Stop talking. You're making it worse." Patricia looked ready to sink into the bench. Gerald dabbed sweat from his forehead with a folded napkin, eyes anywhere but the judge. Then came the ripple, neighbors recognizing what it meant. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "He tried to strip his father's rights." A man muttered, "Over property. Filthy." The noise built until the judge rapped her gavel. "Order, or I clear the room." But the damage was done. The tide had turned. Faces that once smirked at Michael now stared at him like a stranger. Raines waited, calm as stone. "Your Honor, if you'd like corroboration of handwriting," Michael snapped, voice breaking. "It's not mine. Someone forged it. Dad, tell them. Tell them you didn't see me write that." Every eye swung to me. I held his gaze. "I saw you toss my gift in the trash. Why should I believe you value paper more than blood?" Gasps echoed. Reporters scribbled faster. Cameras clicked. Even the judge leaned back, lips pressed, weighing the words. Michael's hands trembled on the tabletop. For the first time since Christmas night, I saw it, the crack beneath the performance. Sweat darkened his collar. His mouth opened, shut, opened again. The clock on the wall ticked, each second amplifying his silence. The judge leaned forward, elbows on the bench, eyes fixed on Michael. The silence in the courtroom was thick, broken only by the rustle of reporters adjusting their cameras. Raines didn't waste the pause. He slid another exhibit across the table, a glossy printout. "Your Honor, these are text messages between the petitioner and his wife, obtained by subpoena from their carrier, dated the same week as the attempted transfer." Michael's head snapped up. "You had no right." But the judge raised a hand. "Show me." The clerk carried the pages up. The judge scanned, then read aloud, "Have him sign tonight. Don't let him stall. If he resists, remind him he's already a burden. Once we have the deed, the rest will follow." Gasps rippled through the gallery. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Gomez, pressed her hand to her mouth. The Channel 7 reporter whispered to his cameraman, and the red light blinked on. Melissa went pale. "That's taken out of context," she hissed, gripping Michael's sleeve hard enough to leave marks. Raines spoke evenly. "We have the full transcript if the court prefers." Michael shot to his feet, sweat beading at his temple. "This is harassment. My father's confused, manipulated, probably by you." "Sit down," the judge snapped, sharper now, "or I'll hold you in contempt." He sank back, but his face twisted, the mask slipping completely. The murmur in the room swelled. Phrases floated. "Unbelievable." "Their own father." Patricia shifted as if to speak, but Gerald grabbed her arm. His face was gray now, all bluster gone. Raines glanced at me, then at the bench. "Your Honor, my client is not confused. He has been patient, too patient. But patience is not incompetence. What you see before you is not an old man slipping. It is a father standing against exploitation." I straightened in my chair. The watch on my wrist ticked, the second hand steady. The sound cut through the noise in my own chest. The judge nodded slowly, then fixed Michael with a stare that stripped away every layer of his performance. "Mr. Hendricks, do you deny writing these messages?" Michael opened his mouth, then shut it again. His hands trembled against the table. Melissa's whisper, "Say something," hissed like steam. but no words came. The silence in that moment was louder than any denial. The room had gone still again, all eyes fixed on Michael. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Sweat glistened at his hairline. His fingers drummed erratically on the table. Melissa tugged at his sleeve, whispering frantic words, but he pulled away, face twisted in panic. The judge's voice cut sharp through the air. "Mr. Hendricks, you've been given multiple opportunities to respond. What we have instead is silence, deflection, and evidence that speaks louder than any denial. Unless counsel has something credible, this court is prepared to rule." Fletcher stood, pale, stammering. "Your Honor, these are family disputes. Emotions run high. Surely it's premature to—" "Sit down, counselor," the judge said, tone icy. "This is exploitation, clear as day." A ripple surged through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. One woman actually gasped aloud. Mrs. Gomez shook her head in disbelief. Gerald and Patricia shrank in their seats, suddenly very small. I rose slowly, the leather of the chair groaning under me. My knees felt stiff, but my voice came steady. "Your Honor, I've spent a lifetime building a home, a family, a name. What my son tried to take wasn't just brick and wood. He tried to erase me while I'm still breathing." The judge watched me closely but didn't interrupt. I pulled the watch box from my coat pocket, placed it on the table, and flipped it open. The Patek caught the harsh fluorescent light, gleaming like a small sun. Gasps whispered through the benches, people finally seeing what had been mocked as junk. "This," I said, lifting it just enough for the second hand to tick audibly, "was my father's. I wanted to pass it down. Instead, my son threw it in the trash." The words landed heavy, and I let the silence sit. Reporters' pens scratched faster. Cameras flashed. Michael looked like he'd been slapped. I set the watch back down, then met the judge's eyes. "He told me I should sign my life away. He laughed when he called me a burden. But today, with all of you here, I say this. I am not finished, and I will not disappear on anyone's terms but my own." The judge gave a small nod. "Noted, the petition for guardianship is denied. The trust stands. This court recognizes Thomas Hendricks as fully competent. Petitioners may face further inquiry regarding attempted fraud. We are adjourned." The gavel struck. Cameras exploded with flashes. Reporters shouted questions, voices bouncing off marble. "Mr. Hendricks, did you know how valuable the watch was? What will happen to your son now?" Michael tried to rise, to say something, but his knees buckled him back into the chair. Melissa covered her face with her hands. Gerald muttered curses under his breath. I picked up the watch, felt the cool weight in my palm. I looked at Michael one last time, his face red, eyes wild, every mask shattered. I slipped the watch onto my wrist, tightened the strap, and spoke loud enough for the nearest cameras to catch it. "You tried to bury me with paper, but today paper buried you." The flashbulbs popped like fireworks. Gasps turned into applause from the gallery, a ripple that even the gavel couldn't silence. I turned, walked out of the courtroom into the cold air, each step lighter than the last, the second hand ticking steady at my wrist. Winter air slapped me awake as I stepped onto the courthouse steps. Reporters clustered, shouting questions, microphones shoved forward. I didn't answer. I just walked through them, the tick of the Patek steady against my wrist. Time had survived. So had I. By the curb, Michael stood slumped beside his SUV. Melissa hissed at him, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You ruined everything." Gerald and Patricia kept their distance, arguing in hushed tones. None of them looked at me. None of them could. That night, the house was warm. I cooked a small steak, let butter sizzle in the pan. The kitchen smelled the way Laura used to make it smell on Fridays. Meat, garlic, the hum of something alive. I ate slowly, not hungry, but savoring every bite. On the counter sat a thick envelope from Rains. Inside, the finalized trust papers. My granddaughter's name steady on the line after mine. Safe, protected, beyond Michael's reach. The phone buzzed once. Michael's name lit the screen. I let it ring until it died. Later, I stood in the living room, looking at the family photos. Laura smiling in the garden. Michael at 8, flour on his cheeks from helping her bake. For a moment, I almost reached for the frame, then I didn't. Instead, I wound the watch, held it to my ear. Tick, tick. Each sound a reminder. Not of what I lost, but of what I kept. I locked the door, dropped Michael's old spare key into the trash, and carried the garbage out myself. The night was cold. the stars sharp. On the porch I whispered, just loud enough for the winter air to take it. Family is supposed to be two-way. He made it one, so I closed the road. The watch ticked on, patient and eternal, as I stepped back inside my house. My house.